I want you to close your eyes and picture this for a second. Imagine waking up on a crisp Tuesday morning, grabbing your coffee, stepping onto your porch to take in the view you've loved your entire life. But instead of birdsong, you hear the grinding mechanical roar of concrete mixers fading into the distance. That is exactly what happened to Arthur Art Miller, a man who looked down his driveway to see the only exit from his property, the historic Old Creek Crossing, completely blocked by massive, gray, ugly concrete Jersey barriers. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a mistake. It was a declaration of war by a corrupt homeowners association that decided Art's 60-year-old family legacy was a stain on their $15 million luxury illusion. The heavy scent of wet cement was still hanging in the morning mist, clogging the air, but the reality was much suffocating because Art's mother, Nana Rose, was a diabetic who needed to get to the clinic for dialysis that very morning. His teenage daughter Sophie was trapped with no way to get to school, and emergency vehicles were effectively cut off from reaching them. The HOA claimed it was for emergency structural repairs, but Art knew better. He knew this was the endgame of a sinister plot to strangle his livelihood until he agreed to sell his $3.2 million land for pennies on the dollar, clearing the final hurdle for their exclusive expansion. But here's the thing, they picked the wrong dirt farmer to mess with, because Art had cameras rolling, 2 years of documentation, an illegal nuclear weapon hidden in the archives that wouldn't just reopen the road, it would send the queen of the HOA straight to federal prison. Now, Art Miller never thought he'd be fighting for his survival at 52 years old. He was the third-generation owner of Miller's Orchard, 15 acres of the most breathtaking rolling hills you've ever seen, covered in heritage apple trees that his grandfather, Grandpa Silas, had planted back in the 60s when this whole area was nothing but dirt roads and honest work. Back then, Grandpa Silas had actually put up his own money to help build Old Creek Crossing, that charming stone bridge connecting their hilltop sanctuary to the county road, creating a legacy that smelled like apple blossoms in the spring and sounded like the crunch of gravel under work boots. It was rural America frozen in time, with the family living in the original Victorian farmhouse, weathered siding that had protected 5 generations of Millers, housing Art, his wife Elena, who worked as a school nurse, their soccer star daughter Sophie, and Nana Rose, who at 78 was the heart of the home despite her failing health. But you know how it goes. Time marches on and money ruins everything. So 10 years ago, a luxury developer called Summit Heights Luxury Living bought up the surrounding 200 acres, bulldozing the history to put up 47 McMansions worth $1 million a pop. Overnight, Art found himself like a fish out of water, surrounded by people who looked at his organic farming operation not as a food source, but as an eyesore, a blemish on their manicured perfection. These new residents formed the Summit Heights Association, claiming they had authority over the shared private road and that historic bridge Art's family helped build, exploiting the original 1962 easement documents that were frustratingly vague about who actually paid for maintenance, creating a legal gray area that was about to become a weapon of mass destruction. Enter the villain of our story, Patricia Patty Vance, a woman who is basically your worst HOA nightmare brought to life. Picture a retired pharmaceutical executive with a helmet of hairspray, always dressed in pristine designer tennis whites, driving a white Tesla Model X like she owned the pavement beneath it. She had moved from the city with an attitude that screamed, "I am the manager," and immediately ran for HOA president, winning unopposed after she somehow terrified or bribed the other candidates into stepping down. Her reign of terror started small, complaining about the agricultural odors from Art's composting. You know, the smell of actual nature, and sending certified letters about property values, anonymous noise complaints about tractors at 7 a.m. because apparently, farming disturbs the sanctity of her morning yoga. It escalated quickly, with Patty parking her Tesla at the bridge entrance, timing Art's comings and goings like a stalker, taking photos of his delivery trucks, measuring tire widths with a tape measure, and documenting every perceived violation of some imaginary community standard. Then she brought in the big guns, hiring Sterling & Stone, a law firm that was notorious for crushing little guys, demanding Art provide proof of legal road access within 30 days or face access termination, which is legalese for, "We are going to lock you in." Art tried to be the good neighbor. He tried to reason with her, offering to pay his fair share of the road upkeep. But Patty just gave him this condescending little smirk and said, "Oh, Arthur, this isn't about money. It's about what's best for the community," making it crystal clear that his family wasn't part of the community. That was the moment Art started recording everything. And during one heated phone call, he overheard Patty talking to someone named Greg about a Phase 1 completion and removing the final obstacle to unlock a $15 million development potential. The night before the bridge was blocked, Patty held a secret emergency meeting that Art wasn't invited to, and the next morning, the concrete barriers were there, effectively imprisoning his family. Nana Rose missed her dialysis, risking her life. Sophie got detention, and Art realized this wasn't a dispute, it was a siege. 48 hours later, Art got a 14-page legal threat from Sterling and Stone that probably cost more than his tractor, telling him to surrender or face total destruction, claiming he had damaged community infrastructure with his excessive commercial traffic. They included photos of tire ruts as evidence, but Art looked closely and realized those tracks came from the HOA's own construction trucks that had placed the barriers. They gave him 21 days to remedy the violations or lose access forever, which meant selling the farm or starving. But while Elena kept the farm running and Sophie did extra chores, Art spent 2 full days in the basement of the county records office, inhaling the dust of old paper, looking for a miracle. And in the dim fluorescent light, he found it. The original 1962 easement deed, written in plain English, stating that the Miller family had perpetual vehicular access rights for agricultural and residential purposes. Even better, he found a clause saying maintenance costs had to be shared proportional to usage, and as he dug into the numbers, he realized the HOA had been overcharging commercial trucking companies and pocketing the difference. He hired Martha Lewis, a chain-smoking, tough-as-nails local attorney who hated HOAs more than she hated taxes, and she immediately filed a quiet title action and demanded a forensic audit of the HOA's suspicious $180,000 annual road budget. That's when Art followed the money trail and found the smoking gun. The HOA had been billing the exact same road repairs to 2 different accounts, charging the members' dues and Summit Heights Luxury Living's construction budget, effectively stealing $45,000 in pure fraud. Patty's reaction was swift and vicious. She hosted another meeting at her mansion, serving imported wine while plotting to destroy a family that had been there since before she was born. Flyers appeared in mailboxes claiming Art's organic fertilizer was toxic to pets, featuring photos taken with telephoto lenses that made compost look like nuclear waste. Then came the psychological warfare. Bright LED floodlights installed at his gate, pointing directly at his house, turning his peaceful nights into a prison yard interrogation, the constant hum of electricity replacing the crickets. But Art was playing chess while Patty was playing checkers. He had trail cameras in the woods that caught board members skulking around his property at midnight, and his farm stand became a hub for intelligence gathering as sympathetic neighbors whispered secrets. One day, Mrs. Higgins, a sweet retired teacher, approached him terrified, whispering that Patty was planning something bigger than just the road. And she was right, because the next morning, Art came out to find his tires slashed in the school parking lot while he was at a parent-teacher conference, the smell of fresh rubber in the air, with security footage showing a white Tesla nearby, just minutes before. Art realized then that this wasn't just about property rights. It was about whether a corrupt board could terrorize an American family into abandoning their heritage. He started sleeping with a baseball bat. Elena started varying her driving routes, and the sound of gravel crunching made the whole family freeze in fear. But Art had one advantage Patty didn't know about. He had been recording every conversation, documenting every threat, and building a case that was about to turn her privileged world upside down. The war shifted from physical intimidation to bureaucratic suffocation when Patty Vance weaponized the government against Art, unleashing a swarm of inspectors, code enforcement, fire marshals, environmental officials, all arriving within a 2-hour window, armed with clipboards and identical complaints about public safety. They demanded Art get a commercial agricultural permit for a farm that had been operating since the Cold War. A permit that cost nearly $3,000 plus a mandatory $15,000 environmental impact study, all with a 45-day deadline or daily fines that would bankrupt him. But Elena, with her sharp nurse's intuition, started digging into social media and found the connection. Patty's LinkedIn showed direct ties to 3 of the county officials, and Facebook photos showed her drinking wine in Napa Valley with the wife of the county commissioner just days before the crackdown. Martha Lewis, their attorney, filed a selective enforcement complaint immediately, pointing out that dozens of other properties had the same violations but were never cited, and she demanded all emails between the board and the county. The documents were devastating, revealing that Patty had been grooming these officials for months with dinner parties and charity galas, with one email explicitly saying they needed to make Art so miserable he'd take any offer just to escape. Then came the turning point. Mrs. Higgins risked everything to bring Art a smartphone recording she'd made by hiding her phone under a pillow during a strategy session at Patty's house. The audio was crystal clear, capturing Patty's voice discussing Phase 2 pressure tactics and, chillingly, mentioning a plan to force Art to sell at 40% below market value so they could flip it to Greg for the full $3.2 million. Art recognized the name Greg. It was the developer contact. This was a conspiracy to steal millions. Patty then went for the jugular, water. She manufactured a fake drought crisis to pass emergency HOA restrictions, cutting off Art's irrigation right at the peak of summer, and mysteriously, the main line to his property developed maintenance issues. Without water, his crops would die, his restaurant contracts would fail, and he'd be finished. But Art didn't beg. He quietly hired a drilling crew and punched a new well right on his own land, completely legal and totally independent of the HOA. The sound of that drill grinding through bedrock at 6 a.m. was the sound of freedom, and it drove Patty insane. The community battle lines hardened, with Patty's loyalists blocking the farm stand with their cars, and Sophie being ostracized at school, uninvited from parties, suffering for her parents' war. But the breaking point, the moment that took this from a legal battle to a blood feud, happened when someone sprayed industrial herbicide along Art's property line in the dead of night, killing the prize heritage apple trees, living history planted by Grandpa Silas over 60 years ago. Art stood there the next morning, the air thick with the acrid, chemical stench of death, touching the withered branches of trees that felt like family members, watching Sophie cry and Nana Rose stare in silence from her wheelchair. That night, Elena found Art sitting in the dark, staring at photos of the trees in bloom, and he whispered, "They aren't just trying to force us out, Elena, they're trying to erase us." This act of environmental cruelty backfired spectacularly. Photos of the dead trees went viral, rallying the town behind the Millers, but Patty doubled down, calling Art's restaurant clients and whispering lies about food safety contamination, causing them to cancel contracts and dropping the farm's income by 70% overnight. Then came the insurance attack. Art's policy was suddenly canceled due to high-risk factors. On the same day, the fire inspector demanded $25,000 in upgrades. Elena discovered that Patty sat on the board of the insurance parent company. Another conflict of interest, another act of corruption. It culminated in a midnight dumping operation caught in high definition by Art's security cameras, showing dump trucks with the Summit Heights logo illegally scattering construction debris, concrete, rusty rebar, chemical waste, all over his organic fields. Patty tried to flip the script, filing complaints that Art was running a hazardous waste dump, but Mrs. Higgins' network and Art's cameras proved the trash came from the developer. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit had been quietly building a file based on the evidence Art was sending them, noticing $400,000 in wire transfers from the developer to Patty's consulting firm, bribes disguised as business. Mike Ross, a neighbor who had seen enough, came forward with a video of Patty handing out $10,000 cash packets to board members. The walls were closing in, but the toll on the family was catastrophic. Nana Rose's heart was failing from the stress, Sophie's grades were tanking, and Elena was secretly looking at Zillow listings in other states, terrified that the bad guys were actually going to win. Art found her crying in the laundry room one night, clutching Sophie's jersey, asking, "What if she wins, Art?" And that was the moment Art Miller decided to stop playing defense. He gathered his war council at the kitchen table, Martha Lewis, David Chun the forensic accountant, and Elena handling the press. They planned a 72-hour blitzkrieg. Martha's paralegal had found a forgotten clause in the 1962 road contract. If maintenance costs ever exceeded 300% of the original estimate, adjusted for inflation, control of the road would automatically revert to the county. Patty's HOA was spending 847% above that limit. Even worse, David Chin found that the independent contractor, Valley Infrastructure, was a subsidiary of Summit Heights, inflating bills by 400% to launder money. This meant the county was now liable for blocking Art's constitutional rights, and because of Nana Rose's disability, they were facing federal civil rights violations. But Art had the ultimate ace up his sleeve. The original environmental impact study for the luxury development had excluded his 15 acres. By attacking him, Patty had forced a new review. Art's land, with its specific ecosystem and the heritage orchard, was habitat for protected bird species. Triggering a federal environmental review would freeze the entire development for at least 18 months, killing the construction loans and bankrupting the developer. As they prepared for the town hall meeting that would be the final showdown, Art stood on his porch, breathing in the night air that still carried the faint chemical smell of the poisoned trees. He knew Patty was desperate. She tried to have him arrested on fabricated terroristic threats, hiring a kid to make fake calls, but the kid confessed to the FBI instantly. She sent Patty into the night with bolt cutters to destroy his irrigation system, unaware she was tampering with federal monitoring equipment, a felony. Everything was set. The trap was sprung. The Riverside Community Center was packed beyond capacity, a standing room-only crowd buzzing with the kind of nervous energy you usually feel before a prize fight. With news crews from CNN and Fox lining the walls, their camera lenses trained like sniper rifles on the stage. At exactly 7 p.m., Patty Vance walked in under federal escort, wearing her signature tennis whites which now looked ridiculous paired with a clunky ankle monitor, her face a mask of hollow defeat. Art stepped to the podium, looking out at the sea of faces, and delivered the opening line that would make the evening news. 2 years ago, we thought we were fighting a neighborhood bully, but tonight, you'll learn we were fighting organized crime. The presentation was a massacre. Massive screens lit up with David Chin's flowcharts showing $60 million in fraud, playing the audio of Patty discussing bribery and kidnapping. And then, the mic drop, footage of Greg Pierce, the developer, being let out of his office in handcuffs just hours earlier. An FBI agent took the stage to announce the largest rural property rights conspiracy prosecution in history. 37 defendants, 214 victimized families, and prison time measured in decades. The crowd erupted, a primal roar of vindication that shook the rafters. Patty's empire crumbled in real time as 3 board members resigned on live TV. But the killing blow came when the EPA announced permanent federal protection for Miller's Orchard, meaning the land could never be developed, preserving Grandpa Silas's legacy forever. Even Nana Rose rolled her wheelchair to the mic to remind everyone that in America, you shouldn't need the FBI to protect you from your neighbors. Patty Vance was sentenced to 32 years. Greg Pierce got life without parole under RICO statutes. The developer, Summit Heights, liquidated everything to pay a $20 million victim compensation fund. 3 months later, the concrete barriers were gone, replaced by the open stone bridge. Art stood in the orchard, now quiet, listening to the birds that had returned. Sophie had won a scholarship to study property law, inspired by the fight. Elena was running a foundation to help other farmers. They had won. But here's the question that keeps me up at night. Art Miller had to become a warrior to save his home. He had to ruin lives, send people to prison, and expose a massive conspiracy just to live in peace. Is it really justice if you have to burn the world down to get it? Or does the system only work for the people brave enough and lucky enough to hold the match? What would you have done? Let me know in the comments.